Nahshon Wright is now the fourth Chicago Bears player to be added to the Pro Bowl roster this season, but unfortunately, the real value of that recognition seems to be declining every year, and that's not his fault.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. On the show today, we're going to look at Nahshon Wright's Pro Bowl edition, where he fits in the NFC cornerback roster, and why it makes it even that much more likely that he does not return to the Chicago Bears next season as he enters free agency. We'll also check in on generally the decline of prestige surrounding Pro Bowl recognition, especially as, Cleveland Browns quarterback Shadeur Sanders gets added to the Pro Bowl, which raises some questions about, what about Caleb Williams? If Shadeur Sanders is in the Pro Bowl, why isn't Caleb Williams more in that conversation? And then we'll check back in with Bears offensive coordinator Declan Doyle, who added another offensive coordinator interview request to his docket. And this one seems like it has more legs than the last one. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. And now Nahshon Wright is recognized as one of the top cornerbacks in football, being named to the Pro Bowl as a replacement for Philadelphia Eagles cornerback Quinyon Mitchell, who's dealing with some kind of injury that won't allow him to participate in the games. And first and foremost, absolutely congratulations to Nahshon Wright. He is a player who led the NFL in turnovers this season when you include the forced fumbles. I think he was tied for the lead in interceptions among cornerbacks, but then overall was a turnover machine for Chicago. Someone whose improvement was entirely unexpected and was above and beyond anything we thought the Bears might get from him when they signed him last season. This is undoubtedly a clear recognition of the type of progress he made and the surprise with which that progress came. But I also think it really even lowers the chances that the Bears were going to bring him back this offseason. And also, I'm not sure that it would have been necessarily the smartest thing for the Bears to do anyway. So certainly Nahshon Wright has played his way into a bigger contract this offseason than what he got to come to the Chicago Bears, which was essentially a 1-year veteran minimum contract that, counted as little as you could possibly hope for against the salary cap. So they were in a pretty good spot financially to, sneak him on the roster and give him a shot this year. Next year will not be so much the case. He's going to make more than the $1.1 million he was paid this season. Now, what exact number is Nahshon Wright going to get? I mean, it's kind of hard to predict when you have a cornerback like this who has one season of breakout performance and not years of consistent proven play. So teams might be a little hesitant to give him a 4-year deal with a huge pay increase, but certainly he's going to get a payday. But could it be a 1-year prove it type of deal where he gets a big raise to, whatever number that's going to be, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 million. I mean, who knows, right? But to a big number. And then after that 1 year, if he plays well again, then he could get that longer term deal. It'll depend so much on how the rest of the cornerback market shapes out, right? It ends up being a supply and demand question. How many other starting caliber cornerbacks ultimately end up hitting the free agent market, and how many teams in free agency need a starting caliber cornerback? If there's a lot of need and not a lot of supply, it's more likely that a team is going to be willing to pay up for Nahshon Wright and say, well, he's better than our other options, so let's get him in here and continue that turnover generation on our defense. Or if there end up being a bunch of cornerbacks at the market and some salary cap casualties in there, all of a sudden, maybe he won't be as in demand comparatively, and he would be more of a prove-it type of deal where he gets a raise, but just not a crazy pay increase. In that kind of scenario, it's possible he comes back to the Chicago Bears, but it doesn't feel all that likely. It didn't feel all that likely before he was named to the Pro Bowl, and when you add the Pro Bowl recognition to it, that is going to increase his value. As much as we'll talk about, I think, the decline in the prestige of the Pro Bowl, it is still written into NFL contracts that guys get bonuses if they make the Pro Bowl. Not every contract, but like many contracts have bonuses and other pay that's stipulated to, okay, if you make the Pro Bowl, you get this much of a pay raise. If you play on the field for this many snaps, like if you're recognized as an all-pro, you get this pay raise. If you go this far in the playoffs, you get pay raise. Like Pro Bowl is still recognized financially as a rewardable accomplishment from teams, and that will be reflected in free agency as like there is a quote-unquote Pro Bowl cornerback, a reigning Pro Bowl cornerback available in free agency that in all likelihood will get him a nice deal from another team. The Bears are not in a position to hand out a bunch of money to another cornerback, right? They gave Jalen Johnson his big deal, was it 2 years ago now? They gave Kyler Gordon his big deal last offseason, or was it right before the start of last season? I guess 2 seasons ago now. I don't remember the exact time in there, but like they have good money invested in 2 cornerbacks already. They're not going to go out and give Nahshon Wright a big, massive deal to come back, in addition to the idea that like the Bears just also don't have a ton of extra salary cap space sitting around. And when it comes to like priorities for Ryan Poles, first of all, you don't have any safeties under contract for next season, and you got to pay at least probably one of Kevin Byard or Jaquan Brisker. You might not even be able to afford both on big contracts. So you need to spend at safety. You also need to upgrade on the defensive line. And so if you're starting to put big money or significant money at all towards those positions, you're just not going to have a lot of cash left at cornerback, especially when you're already investing a lot in that position. And you've got other guys that you at least like in terms of guys with upside, with Tyreek Stevenson, who's been in and out of the doghouse, but also Zay Frazier, you just drafted in the 5th round this past year and haven't gotten to see him yet. And on the injured reserve all season was the other recent draft pick, Terrell Smith, from a couple years ago. I guess the same draft class as Tyreek Stevenson, but like guys the Bears have liked. And that doesn't mean they won't add anything at cornerback to compete there, but I don't think they're going to go out and make Nahshon Wright some big money priority when they got other fish to fry. And also, I'm not so sure that Nahshon Wright is a consistent enough player that's worth investing big money in. Like, he gets to the Pro Bowl because of the turnovers, but if you're trying to like rank the top 10 cornerbacks in the NFL or even in the NFC, I don't think he's in that group necessarily. Like, you look at what Nahshon Wright did this season, like, of course, like the interceptions and the forced fumbles were great, but like he was, in terms of completion percentage when targeted, he was 69th among cornerbacks specifically. In terms of yards per reception allowed, 91st among cornerbacks. He gave up the 5th most touchdowns of any cornerback in coverage this season. We've talked about it throughout the course of the season. He is a big play, boom or bust cornerback. He's going to get you the turnovers on the high end that are super, super valuable for your defense. And on the low end, he's given up a lot of touchdowns and a lot of yards and a lot of completions. Like, he's going to allow big plays for the offense, and he's going to create big plays for the defense. And there is value to that for sure, but it's really high highs and pretty darn low lows within there. And that's not a player I want to give a bunch of big money to, because how well do you trust that the interceptions and turnovers are going to stay? Because the bad plays have been there the whole time. The turnovers just came this season. So is he going to be able to keep doing that every year, or will those go down and the bad plays remain? Like, I'm not willing to take that risk in the form of a long-term contract. A 1-year deal, sure. A long-term contract, no thanks. So when I look at like Nahshon Wright's upcoming free agency, I certainly think a couple teams make a lot of sense. Mainly, I think the Washington Commanders with Dan Quinn, because he was the defensive coordinator in Dallas when they drafted Nahshon Wright and when he was there for his first few seasons with Al Harris also, but like Dan Quinn was the coordinator there. And also Washington just hired their new defensive coordinator, Durante Jones, who was the defensive backs coach in Minnesota last year when Nahshon Wright was a member of the Minnesota Vikings. So a lot of coaching staff connections to Washington. Or the other option for me is wherever, if Al Harris gets a defensive coordinator job, it would not surprise me if Nahshon Wright ends up being signed by that team, whatever team that ends up being, for Al Harris to take his Pro Bowl cornerback with him. But unfortunately, like, the value and of that Pro Bowl prestige keeps going down, where it's not a brand new trend, but every year we're seeing some guys make the Pro Bowl that don't deserve it for what they did on the field that season. So we'll take a look at the latest example this year in Shadeur Sanders and what that says about Caleb Williams as a quarterback who also did a lot of good things and would be a welcomed addition to the Pro Bowl for just as valid reasons as Shadeur Sanders, next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena or any sports venue. The crowd, the energy, the moment. But getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. And that's why Gametime has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast, without the hassle, because it puts the advantage back where it belongs, with you, the fans. They've got their pricing all in upfront, so you're not seeing any surprise fees at checkout that make your tickets seem way more expensive than you thought they'd be, and let you see your view from the seat before you buy the ticket to make that decision that much easier. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON, locked on, for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. The Locked On Bears podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Because whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is where predictions turn into plays, and it's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, you can bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. So make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thanks for making the Locked On Bears podcast your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and we really appreciate you everyday listeners that are tuning in 5 days a week. We really appreciate you guys are the lifeblood of what we do here. And if you haven't already, go check out our new Everydayers Club here on Locked On Bears. It gives you access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Bears that's compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcasting app, plus an invite to a members-only Locked On Everydayers Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of Locked On Bears. If you want to check it out, go to lockedonbears.supercast.com to find out more. You can always find that link in the show description wherever you're tuning in to Locked On Bears. Because we're always keeping tabs on what's going on with the Bears and also how the Bears are affected by other news around the NFL. And I couldn't help but think about Caleb Williams when news came out from Andrew Schultz that Shadeur Sanders was named to the Pro Bowl for the AFC. And that is shocking and surprising for a number of reasons, and we don't necessarily have to spend a lot of time here talking about Shadeur Sanders, but I think we kind of all have the understanding that however you think Shadeur Sanders played this season, he was not one of the three best quarterbacks in the AFC in terms of on-the-field production. I mean, where you want to rank him is not the debate I'd like to have right now, but I think we can pretty universally say that like a number of AFC quarterbacks performed better than Shadeur Sanders. I think everyone listening to this podcast could agree that Caleb Williams performed better than Shadeur Sanders. Now, obviously, AFC versus NFC, and that's the split there. But the point being, like, there's clearly a bit of, like, merit that's going out the window a little bit here with this decision. And this is not all about Shadeur Sanders, right? This happened a couple of years ago with Tyler Huntley of the Baltimore Ravens at the time being named to the Pro Bowl despite being Baltimore Ravens backup that year behind Lamar Jackson. I mean, he started a number of games, but like even that season wasn't like he was dominating it at some kind of Pro Bowl level. And we can even bring this full circle and go all the way back to 2018 when one Mitchell Trubisky was named to the NFL Pro Bowl. And you didn't hear any of us complaining at the time, but that 2018 season, when the Bears as a team were great, Mitch Trubisky threw for 3,200 yards and 24 touchdowns, completed 2/3 of his passes, about 230 yards per game. His passer rating was under 100. Like, I'm not here to crap on Trubisky and say he wasn't any good that year, but like, he was not a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback. Like, part of the Pro Bowl recognition as viewership keeps declining, as fewer and fewer people care about it, as it's not even a football game anymore. It's a skills competition. Clearly, the NFL would like to find ways to add intrigue and interest to the Pro Bowl. And Shadeur Sanders absolutely adds to that. And if that is indeed like the goal, then like I'm all for it in terms of like adding like, but you have to like admit that's the case, right? Like we can either say it's about getting truly the best NFL players, and then you got to put the best NFL players there, or you can say, hey, we want to make the most entertaining game possible, so get the most entertaining players there. And currently we're trying to do both at the same time, and that's not how it would work. Because like I think by comparison then, like why isn't Caleb Williams much more in that conversation? Like clearly, statistically, we've heard all the arguments about Caleb Williams, right? Especially everyone will always just talk about the completion percentage and write off any and every other thing he did this season. But like if we start to move past this idea of like, okay, with guys like Shadeur Sanders, Tyler Huntley, and even Mitch Trubisky, like that this is not a statistics-based decision or argument there. It's a like vibes and maybe entertainment value argument there. Caleb Williams fits it to a T. Like, I'm not here to tell you like, oh, Caleb Williams deserves to be in the Pro Bowl. Like they just named Jared Goff as a replacement for the NFC. I'm like, in almost every measurable category, Jared Goff had a better season than Caleb Williams. I mean, completion percentage, yards per attempt, touchdowns, interceptions, right? Like it's not there's no shame in saying that, hey, there's some quarterbacks in the NFC that are better than Caleb Williams. But like, I also think the arguments about Caleb Williams as a potential Pro Bowler are not statistical ones. When we talk about Caleb Williams having the third highest dropped pass rate of any quarterback in the NFL this season. It's not just the total number of drop passes, because some quarterbacks throw more passes than others, but the rate, 8.3% of his passes were dropped. He had the third most total and the third highest rate. I guess either way you want to split it. He had the second most batted passes this season and the most throwaways this season. Well, also, his passes on average went the seventh deepest average depth of target this season. So, like, he's attempting more difficult passes. He's having more of them thrown away, more of them dropped, and more of them batted at the line of scrimmage. Like, these things contribute to the statistical shortcomings for Caleb Williams this season that then make it impossible to do like a pure numbers to numbers argument. And so it becomes a subjective argument of, well, what did you see on tape and who was doing more with less in what level of difficult situations, right? And that's an argument that certainly no one is ever going to win on social media. Anything online, that argument's not going to go anywhere. And even in person with your buddies at the bar, it's a tough argument to actually resolve and have anybody win there. But I think perhaps the single biggest obstacle against Caleb Williams this year making the Pro Bowl was just that, like, the NFC in general had more consistent quarterback play this year than the AFC, where you had more guys in the AFC, like the big name guys, not really qualifying in terms of like Joe Burrow only played half the season in the AFC. Patrick Mahomes had a down year. Lamar Jackson had a little bit of a down year. Like their numbers are down compared to where they usually are in years past. And some of the big names that would be automatic AFC Pro Bowlers that, of course, would keep Shadeur Sanders out of the Pro Bowl, but not this year in some part because those guys aren't available. Whereas, like, I think in the NFC, you saw the big names play well and also some less conventional names also play well that moved their way up. I mean, you got Stafford and Love and Prescott and Purdy and Darnold obviously had a really good season. Jared Goff continues to play well. Like, there's a bunch of guys that kind of all stacked up that we weren't necessarily expecting. Was Darnold going to have this great of a season already right away in Seattle? Like, maybe a little bit more of a drop-off expected there. I mean, a bunch of different guys. Even Bryce Young had a better season this year than we were expecting from him. Not that I think he was better than Caleb specifically, but just point being, like, a lot of guys in the NFC played well. Not as many big names played well in the AFC, so it's easier to push for somebody like Shadeur to sneak in the AFC than it is for Caleb, because there's just more quarterbacks in the NFC that are just as deserving, if not more deserving, than what Caleb was able to do. I still think, from an entertainment value perspective, you want to get the guys who can make the most spectacular throws in a skills competition for throwing. I mean, that's Caleb Williams in terms of arms and off-angle throwing platforms. I also think from a Bears fan perspective, yeah, you'd like to have Caleb get the recognition for his season or whatever, but like, you don't need your quarterback throwing extra passes in a meaningless contest. Like, not that there's much of an injury risk, but it ain't zero. So I would rather just skip that altogether and say, hey, let's save that arm for next season and not put any sort of even minuscule chance of anything going wrong and jeopardizing any part of his offseason whatsoever there. What could jeopardize part of Caleb Williams' offseason is if he loses his offensive coordinator, because we thought, well, Declan Doyle looked like he was coming back after he kind of withdrew his name from the Philadelphia Eagles offensive coordinator job. So it's like, all right, great. You're running it back with the same crew. Well, not so fast. Another team has stepped to the plate, and it wouldn't surprise me if more do even beyond this. So we'll check in on the latest interview request for Declan Doyle, why this one feels a little bit more likely, and what the secession plan might be if the Bears do end up indeed losing their offensive coordinator this offseason. That's next on Locked On Bears.
Hey, it's Matt Derry from the Locked On Lions podcast. The people I love depend on me. If I'm gone, the financial responsibilities don't disappear. I didn't want my family figuring things out during the hardest moment of their lives. That's why I knew only one place to go. I chose life insurance through my friends at Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. I love the folks at Ethos. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get the free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. That is ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Application times and rates may vary.
The Locked On Bears podcast is also brought to you by PrizePicks, the better way to play daily fantasy sports. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to stay locked into every moment than with PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app where it always feels good to be right. With football season coming down to its final stretch, now's the perfect time to close it out strong. PrizePicks makes watching the game even more exciting by letting you build simple lineups around player stat projections. No drafts, no waiting, just football action all the way through the big game. It's incredibly easy to get started. You just pick two or more players and choose more or less on their stat projections. And it can be a combination of football, basketball, soccer, hockey, tennis, all the sports involved on PrizePicks. You can make your lineup in literally 60 seconds or less. It's a lot of fun. I highly encourage you to check it out. Download the PrizePicks app today and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. So for a minute there, we thought Ben Johnson might be in the clear with offensive coordinator Declan Doyle because he interviewed with the Eagles and then withdrew his name from consideration for that job. But turns out he is indeed a popular candidate this offseason, and maybe Ben Johnson won't actually be able to hold on to him because the latest team to throw their name in the hat now is the Baltimore Ravens, putting in an interview request for Declan Doyle. And I guess technically, at the time I'm recording this podcast, I don't know that I've seen it official that the Bears will allow that request and not block that request. But if they didn't block the Eagles request, I assume they won't block the Ravens request and that he will indeed interview with the Baltimore Ravens for their vacant offensive coordinator job, despite it being a lateral move in the eyes of the NFL. The big key there, of course, is that the Baltimore Ravens would be asking and looking for Declan Doyle to call plays for the Ravens offense, which he is not getting the opportunity to do in Chicago, which is a big part of why Ben Johnson is letting him explore these opportunities. And I think when we talked about the Eagles job, it was easy to kind of sit there and say, well, is the Eagles job the right one for Declan Doyle to jump to? Like, there's always a little bit of job security questions around Nick Sirianni, and Eagles fans certainly are not a very forgiving group. And we've seen Jalen Hurts revert a bit in recent seasons, and there's a big mess with A.J. Brown on that offense and him being upset. They're kind of in this transition of leadership in terms of Kelsey retired a couple years ago, and they're trying to rebuild. Lane Johnson's on the end of his career. Like, they're trying to figure out, I mean, they got Saquon Barkley and some good receivers, but like, it's a potentially messy offensive coordinator job there that you could see him saying, you know what? I'm going to wait for really the perfect right opportunity for me. And Baltimore feels like much closer to whatever that might look like. Like, the opportunity to go be the play caller for Lamar Jackson is a super rare thing. A quarterback that can move like that and is that dynamic of a playmaker for your offense. And you have Derrick Henry under contract for now. And I think there's some speculation that they could move off of Derrick Henry at some point here and try and get a little younger in the backfield. But like, still, Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, Derrick Henry, I mean, Isaiah Likely, they've got the tight ends that Declan Doyle would like to use in the offense. You know, I'm sure they could still use a little more at receiver, but Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, like, they've got something there, and old DeAndre Hopkins too, I suppose. And maybe the bigger picture here is like, it's a play calling job that the Eagles might have been a play calling job, but you still have an offensive head coach looming over you a little bit. But like, Ravens is like kind of a fresh start, right? They hired Jesse Minter, defensive coordinator, who you feel good about as a smart, young, ascending defensive coach. So he could go to Baltimore and feel like, okay, I'm going to have pretty good defensive support. I've got a multi-time MVP quarterback. I don't think, has Derrick Henry ever won the MVP, but like an MVP caliber running back, maybe past his prime there. 2 elite tight ends and obviously an offseason to still add more pieces to that. It would be a very intriguing gig for Declan Doyle. Because presumably, right, Declan Doyle's plan, like long term, I'm assuming he wants to eventually become an NFL head coach, right? And part of the problem in Chicago is that he's not getting the opportunity to be the offensive play caller. So it will be harder for a team to convince itself to hire him to be their head coach if he's never called plays before. So he could go to Baltimore, call plays for really a year or two if he does it well with Lamar Jackson, and then get his own head coaching opportunities before he turns 35. Like, that's kind of the pathway that he's looking at here. And like, it's hard for me to sit here and say Declan Doyle is better off being a non-play calling coordinator for the Bears than going to the Ravens and taking over as the play caller. Like, you could make the argument, well, the Bears won more games this season and are currently, you know, the more consistent, better team right now, that Declan Doyle maybe has a better shot of winning a Super Bowl next year with the Bears than the Ravens, just because the Ravens will be a brand new staff and there's transition and turnover and change. Like, they're going to have a learning curve next year that the Bears are not going to have nearly as much of. That staying with the Bears continuity might have more higher chance for success as a team this season, but better for his career might be the Baltimore Ravens. So now it becomes a very real loss opportunity for Chicago. Plus, we cannot rule out the possibility that other teams will continue to come calling, you know, as depending on who the Las Vegas Raiders hire as their head coach, depending on who the Arizona Cardinals hire as their head coach, even the Cleveland Browns still trying to figure out their head coaches. And maybe none of those are teams that he would be super eager to go be the offensive coordinator for. But the point being is he's going to have opportunities even if he doesn't take the Baltimore job. So certainly Ben Johnson has to already be planning on, all right, what's plan B? What's my succession plan if Declan Doyle goes? Presumably, almost certainly it's an in-house hire, right? You're not just going to bring in a brand new offensive coordinator from outside of this organization that has a bunch of really bright assistants. Like, you're going to hire somebody internally, almost certainly. It'd be really surprising and shocking to see like them do what the Lions did, right? Go bring in John Morton from outside the organization to try and pick back up. And the Bears have plenty of qualified, intriguing candidates on their own coaching staff. I think when I look at the list, it's like priority number one for me would be Antoine Randall L., the wide receivers coach, is who I think I would try and promote to offensive coordinator, mainly because if you don't make him your offensive coordinator this year, he's going to be somebody's offensive coordinator in 2027 at the absolute latest. It wouldn't surprise me if he starts getting OC interviews also even yet this winter. But in the meantime, like, promote him, like give him reasons to stick around by moving him up to a new position. Obviously, you know, he hasn't been a play caller before in the NFL, and he's still a young coach, but like, he's not going to be your play caller either. So it could be a nice like stepping stone for him. And he's been an NFL coach now since 2019, so he's not brand new to this thing. I think he would be a really high quality fit there. If they want to go with the most experienced guy on staff, then it's passing game coordinator Press Taylor, who has been offensive coordinator before in the NFL for the Jacksonville Jaguars for 2 seasons. But talk to any Jaguars fans about how they felt about Press Taylor at that time. Not big fan. So I would prefer the Bears don't promote Press Taylor to that role. Would it be awkward if they take a wide receivers coach and promote him past the passing game coordinator and making him offensive coordinator? Maybe, but it's worth noting Antoine Randall L has the title of wide receivers coach and assistant head coach. So there's a natural pathway progression there. I think the other guy I would throw in this mix then is quarterbacks coach JT Barrett, just because he's working directly with Caleb Williams, and he's a guy you would also like to keep around here. But he's only in he'll be entering his 4th season as an NFL coach. So it might be a little bit early to jump JT Barrett up to that role, but like he's another guy who could leave for an OC job in the next year or two if Caleb Williams and the offense continue to play at a high level. But like those 3 guys, almost certainly one of those 3 would replace Declan Doyle if he goes. But then you got to replace one of those guys, right? I mean, I guess you could have Antoine Randall be OC and wide receivers coach, but if they had separate guys for it already, you might as well like bring in a replacement there. And they still need a formal replacement at running backs coach for Eric Bieniemy, who's already left to be the Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator. So there's going to be at least one new coach on this Bears staff next season. In all likelihood, multiple new coaches on this Bears staff. And when they make those decisions, you can be sure we'll break it down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Don't forget to check out the Everydayers Club for an ad-free audio feed of Locked On Bears. Just go to lockedonbears.supercast.com to find out more. But, you're more than welcome to keep listening the same way you always listen. We're free and available on all platforms. We're not going to go behind a paywall or anything like that. And we'll always make sure that each time you tune in to Locked On Bears, you leave with another opportunity to bear down.